Hey, it's your old pal Tom here on the Tom Gully Show. Let me tell you about Amelia Earhart, a truly spectacularly successful early pioneer of aviation. And I know there's a lot of controversy behind that, but I think really I can dispel that during today's program. It's what I like to refer to as poppycock. And then, of course, we'll also get into her much documented disappearance and the multiple attempts to find out what actually happened to Amelia Earhart and the many controversies behind that. This, of course, is our cold open. We do this so people have time to file in to our interactive YouTube chat room. And so our audio podcast audience doesn't go, what's up with these songs? Yeah, I'm about to play a couple songs that give people time to get into our chat room. So if you're watching on YouTube on demand or you're listening to our audio podcast on one of the 30 platforms that it's on, just fast forward to the actual beginning of the show. You'll enjoy it. And the songs are about the show, and they're real toe tappers from our musical director, Leon Kennedy. I'm doing this episode with the knowledge that Amelia Earhart was flying aircraft at a time when there was no guarantee that you were going to land safely. You know, air flight technically began in 1904. She was flying in the 20s and the 30s. The technology just hadn't been developed. And I say that because I am terrified of flying. And to make matters worse, for some reason that I cannot explain, I am addicted to YouTube videos that describe the reasons for airplane crashes. One of them is an amazing channel called Pilot Debrief. It's hosted by a guy who used to fly fighter jets. And he basically covers private aircraft. Not commercial aircraft, but, just the kind that, are 4, 5, 6, 8-seaters. Regular people fly them. And it's an amazing channel. You should go to Pilot Debrief and check it out. But another one that I follow is called Mentor Pilot. It's hosted by a guy from Scandinavia. He speaks excellent English. That's not a problem. And the graphics are amazing. But he covers commercial aircraft crashes. And both of these shows detail the very tiny things that people do wrong that result in, bad things happening. Ensuring pretty much I'm not flying anymore, man. It's just not happening. That's why I have so much respect for Amelia Earhart. So, when I tell you all the amazing things she did that are normally glossed over, people go, Amelia Earhart, she flew planes, Yet, no, she did a lot more than that. And after a couple of songs here real quickly, let me tell you about Amelia Earhart.
Tom Gully's back. Yeah, Tom Gully's back. We're on the track. We're never off the track. Yeah. Tom Gully's on the air. Doesn't take much. Yeah. Tom Gully's on the air. Doesn't take much. Yeah. Tom Gully's in the chair. The people crowding round where everyone gets in place. Dancing all night with a smile on the face. He cuts through the noise, never chasing the race. Just Tom on the waves at a steady pace. Yeah, yeah, Tom's back. He's putting down the track. The Tom Gully Show is back. He's putting down the track. Yeah, yeah, Tom's back. He's putting down the track. The Tom Gully Show is back. He's putting down the track. Headphones on, the lights begin to glow. Every night he's got a story to show. From strange little moments to the things we all know. He lets it all breathe and he lets it all go. Laughter breaks through, then a pause, then a truth. From the good old days in a radio booth. Don't ask for facts, don't beg for proof. We dance in the dark to that gully groove. Yeah, yeah, Tom's back. He's laying down the facts. The Tom Gully Show is back. He's laying down the facts. Yeah, yeah, Tom's back. He's laying down the facts. The Tom Gully Show is back. He's laying down the facts. Oh, yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Oh, yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Oh, yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Oh, yeah. Tom's back. It doesn't take much. He's back. He's laying down the facts. Oh, yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Oh, yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Get on there. Bop, bop. G-U-L-L-E-Y. G-U-L-L-E-Y. Tom Gully's here. G-U-L-L-E-Y. He's here to stay. G-U-L-L-E-Y. The Gully Guarantee. That's what the people need. We're all here to see Tom Gully. G-U-L-L-E-Y. G-U-L-L-E-Y. Tom Gully's here. G-U-L-L-E-Y. He's here to stay. G-U-L-L-E-Y. The lights are low, so start the show. Tom's here to go, so let it G-U-L-L-E-Y. G-U-L-L-E-Y. Tom Gully's here. G-U-L-L-E-Y. He's
Hey, everybody, what's going on? What's hot? What's hip? What's happening? What is shaking? Let me tell you about Amelia Earhart. And I think by the end of the show, you will have a new appreciation for all the things this woman did. And we'll get into the craziness surrounding her disappearance as well. Before we get going, please do me a favor. Like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell. All these things are absolutely free. They only cost you a click. I know you've clicked before, and no one has ever charged you for it. So if we could get one of those clicks, especially on a like, that would be great. We do have super chats. We have memberships, gifted memberships. Also, if you go to our YouTube description, there is a whole lot of other stuff there, including the PayPal, where you give the most, I get the most, and the amazing roller skater Texas girl, again, was super generous in the PayPal yesterday, and we thank her for that. So love it when our supporters do that. Helps us out with the show here. And so you can go to thetomgullyshow.com where our merchandise store is. And there's a wide variety of top quality name brand items sure to add a charm and warmth to any room, making you a focal point of praise and pleasure. A lot of stuff with our logo on it. In our chat room currently, we have the chef there at Geraldine's just off Fountain Square in Indianapolis, Indiana on English Avenue. Neil Cooper and the chef are in the kitchen. When guests of the Tom Gully Show do stay in Indianapolis, they always go to Geraldine's Supper Club and Lounge, and it's delicious, I would imagine. He's a chef, you know. Sky is also here, the technically proficient Sky. He knows lots of things about softwares. Anyway, let me tell you about Amelia Earhart. Shall I? I think I shall. Amelia Mary Earhart was born July 24th, 1897, and she disappeared July 2nd, 1937, although she was declared no longer with us January 5th, 1939. She was an American aviator and aviation pioneer who became one of the most celebrated figures of early flight. She even got the Distinguished Flying Cross, which, for those of you watching on YouTube, I couldn't get a picture of one, but I did find I won't call it a cartoon of one. It looks like something you might see in a coloring book, but it's the closest I could. She was the first female passenger to cross the Atlantic by airplane. A lot of people say, oh, so she was just riding along. That happened in 1928. And in 1932, however, she did become the first woman to make a non-stop solo transatlantic flight. That's what she got the Distinguished Flying Cross for. So there you are. Amelia was born in Atchison, Kansas. She was the daughter of Samuel Edward Stanton Earhart and Amelia Amy Earhart. She was born in the home of her maternal grandfather, Alfred Gideon Otis, who was a former judge in Kansas and was the president of the Atchison Savings Bank, a leading resident of the town. Following family custom, Amelia was named after her two grandmothers, Amelia Josephine Hares and Mary Wells Patton. From an early age, Amelia was the dominant sibling, while her sister, Grace, 2 years her junior, was kind of a follower. You know, her sister was a high school teacher, an author, and an activist. And she spent decades biographing Amelia's life and legacy after Amelia's disappearance. Amelia was nicknamed Mealy, sometimes Millie. Grace was nicknamed Pidge, and both girls continue to answer to their childhood nicknames into adulthood. Their upbringing was unconventional. Amy Earhart, their mother, did not believe in raising her children to be nice little girls. No. The children's maternal grandmother disapproved of the bloomers they wore because it was a scandal. It was scandalous. And although Amelia liked the freedom of movement they provided, she was sensitive to the fact that neighborhood girls wore dresses. The Earhart children seemed to have a spirit of adventure and would set off daily to explore their neighborhood. As a child, Amelia spent hours playing with her sister Pidge, climbing trees, hunting rats with a rifle. That's right, I said hunting rats with a rifle. And sledding downhill. Some biographers have characterized young Amelia as a tomboy. The girls kept worms, moths, katydids, and a tree toad they gathered in a growing collection. In 1904, which, by the way, was the first year of flight with the Wright brothers, and with the help of her uncle, Amelia Earhart constructed a homemade ramp that was fashioned after a roller coaster she had seen on a trip to St. Louis, Missouri. And they secured this ramp to the roof of the family tool shed. After her well-documented first flight, she emerged from the broken wooden box that had served as a sled with a busted lip, a torn dress, and a sense of exhilaration, saying to her sister, "Oh, Pidge, it's just like flying." In 1907, her father's job as a claims officer for the Rock Island Railroad led to a transfer to Des Moines, Iowa. The following year, at the age of 10, Amelia saw her first aircraft at the Iowa State Fair in Des Moines. Their father tried to interest his daughters in taking a flight, but after looking at the rickety aircraft, Amelia promptly asked if they could go back to the merry-go-round. She later described the biplane as a rusty thing of wire and wood and not at all interesting. Sisters Amelia and Grace, who from her teenage years went by the name Muriel, remained with their grandparents in Atchison while their parents moved into a new, smaller home in Des Moines. During this period, the Earhart girls received homeschooling from their mother and a governess. And this is the only known incidents that I know of an American having a governess, but indeed she had a governess. Amelia later said she was exceedingly fond of reading and spent many hours in the large family library. In 1909, when the family was reunited in Des Moines, the Earhart children were enrolled in public school for the first time, and Amelia, age 12, entered 7th grade. It's interesting to me that in Atchison, Kansas, that she came from a family that was a bit well-to-do. But the Earhart family finances seemingly improved with the acquisition of a new house and the hiring of 2 servants. But it soon became apparent that her father, Edwin, was an alcoholic. In 1914, he was forced to retire. He attempted to rehabilitate himself through treatment, but the Rock Island Railroad never reinstated him. About this time, Earhart's grandmother, Amelia Otis, died. She left a substantial estate that placed her daughter's share in a trust because they were fearful that Edwin's drinking would exhaust the funds. The Otis house was auctioned along with its contents, and Amelia later described these events as the end of her childhood. In 1915, after a long search, Edwin Earhart finally found work as a clerk at the Great Northern Railroad in St. Paul, Minnesota, where Amelia entered Central High School as a junior. Edwin applied for a transfer to Springfield, Missouri in 1915, but the current claims officer reconsidered his retirement and demanded his job back, leaving Edwin Earhart unemployed. And Amy Earhart took her children to Chicago, where they lived with friends. Amelia canvassed nearby high schools in Chicago to find the best science program. She rejected the high school nearest her home, complaining that the chemistry lab was just like a kitchen sink. She eventually enrolled in Hyde Park High School, but spent a miserable semester for which a yearbook caption noted, A.E., the girl in brown who walks alone. Now, Amelia Earhart, I might add, often takes a little criticism for being so tomboyish. Well, for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm about to dispel that notion. As a young girl in her late teens and early 20s, there she is in an evening gown. And in this picture, she actually has wings on. So this may have been indeed during her early years of flight. It's actually, obviously, after she learned to fly, because her hair is very short. And she did that after seeing other aviators, which I think I will cover in just a little while. After graduating from Hyde Park High School in 1916, she continued to aspire to a future career. She kept a scrapbook of newspaper clippings about successful women in male-dominated fields, including film direction and production, in law, advertising, management, and mechanical engineering. So she was greatly inspired by other women. She began junior college at the Ogonitz School in Rydell, Pennsylvania, but did not complete her program. During Christmas vacation in 1917, she visited her sister in Toronto, Canada, where she saw wounded soldiers returning from World War I. After receiving training as a nurse's aide from the Red Cross, she began working with the Voluntary Aid Detachment at the Spandina Military Hospital, where her duties included food preparation for patients with special diets and handing out prescribed medication in the hospital's dispensary. And it was there that Amelia Earhart heard stories from military pilots and developed an interest in flying. In 1918, when the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic reached Toronto, Amelia was engaged in nursing duties that included night shifts at Spandina Military Hospital, and in early November that year, she became infected and was hospitalized for pneumonia and maxillary sinusitis, which obviously affects your sinuses and nasal cavity and all that, which would be important later on. She was discharged in December of 1918, about 2 months later. Her sinus-related symptoms were pain and pressure around one eye and what we'll refer to as copious mucus drainage via nostrils and throat. While staying in the hospital during the pre-antibiotic era, Earhart had painful minor operations to wash out the affected sinus, but these procedures were not successful, and her headaches worsened. Her convalescence lasted nearly a year, which she spent at her sister's home in Northampton, Massachusetts. She passed the time reading poetry, learning how to play the banjo, believe it or not, and studying mechanics. Chronic sinusitis significantly affected Earhart's flying and other activities in later life, and sometimes she was forced to wear a bandage on her cheek to cover a small drainage tube. Yes, I said drainage tube. It's never good when you have to wear a drainage tube. By 1919, she prepared to enter Smith College, where her sister was a student, but she changed her mind and enrolled in a course of medical studies and other programs at Columbia University. But she quit her studies a year later to be with her parents, who had reunited in California. In the early 1920s, Earhart and a young woman friend visited an airfield held in conjunction with the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto. And she said, the interest aroused in me in Toronto led me to all the air circuses in the vicinity. One of the highlights of the day was a flying exhibition put on by a World War I ace. The pilot saw Earhart and her friend, who were watching from an isolated clearing, and dived at them. I'm sure he said to himself, "Watch me make them scamper," she said. Earhart, stood her ground as the aircraft came close. I did not understand it. Can I learn to talk today? Could that happen today? I did not understand it at the time, she said, but I believe that little red airplane said something to me as it swished by. On December 28th, 1920, Earhart and her father attended an aerial meet at Doherty Field in Long Beach, California. She asked her father to ask about passenger flights and flying lessons. She was booked for a passenger flight the following day at Emory Rogers Field at the corner of Wilshire Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue. A 10-minute flight with Frank Hawks, who later gained fame as an air racer, cost $10. That would be $160 in today. The ride with Hawks changed Earhart's life. She said, by the time I got 200 or 300 feet off the ground, I knew I had to fly. The next month, she engaged a woman named Netta Snook, an early female aviation pioneer herself, to be her flying instructor. The initial contract was for 12 hours of instruction, and that cost $500, which would be $9,000 today. Working at a variety of jobs, including photographer, truck driver, stenographer at a local telephone company, Earhart saved $1,000, which would be $18,000 today, for flying lessons. She had her first lesson at Kinner Field on the west side of Long Beach Boulevard and Tweedy Road, now in the city of Southgate. And there she is with Netta Snook. These people took a lot of pictures, by the way. A lot of pictures. Snook used a crash salvage Kurdish JN Canuck airplane she had restored for training. To reach the airfield, Earhart had to take a bus, then walk 4 miles. Earhart's mother provided part of the $1,000 stake against her better judgment. Earhart cropped her hair short in the style of other female flyers. 6 months later, in mid-1921, and against Snook's advice, Earhart purchased a second-hand chromium yellow Kinner Airster airplane, which she nicknamed the Canary. After her first solo landing, she bought a new leather flying coat. Due to the newness of the coat, she was subjected to teasing, so she aged it by sleeping in it and staining it with aircraft oil. This lady wanted to fly really, really bad. On October 22nd, 1922, Earhart flew the Airster to an altitude of 14,000 feet, setting a world record for female pilots. On May 16th, 1923, Earhart became the 16th woman in the United States to be issued a pilot's license by the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale. Only 16 female pilots at the time. It's crazy. Throughout the early 1920s, following a disastrous investment in a failed gypsum mine, I love stories from the early 1900s. They all have stories like this. Following a disastrous investment in a failed gypsum mine, you know, for when you always wanted to get rich mining gypsum. Earhart's inheritance from her grandmother, which her mother was now administering, steadily diminished until it was exhausted. Consequently, with no immediate prospect of recouping her investment in flying, Earhart sold the Canary and a second Kinner and bought a yellow Kissel Goldbug Speedster. These old planes had great names. A 2-seat automobile, and named it Yellow Peril. Simultaneously, pain from Earhart's old sinus problem worsened, and in early 1924, she was hospitalized for another sinus operation, which was, again, unsuccessful. She tried a number of ventures that included setting up a photography company. Following her parents' divorce in 1924, Earhart drove her mother in Yellow Peril on a transcontinental trip from California with stops throughout the western United States and northward to Banff, Alberta, Canada. Their journey ended in Boston, Massachusetts, where Earhart went under another, now more successful sinus operation. After recuperating, she returned to Columbia University for several months, but was forced to abandon her studies and any other further plans for enrolling at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, because her mother could no longer afford the tuition fees and associated costs. In 1925, Earhart found employment first as a teacher, then as a social worker at Dennison House, a Boston settlement house. While living in Medford, Massachusetts, to do this job, she maintained her interest in aviation, becoming a member of the American Aeronautical Society's Boston chapter, and eventually being elected its vice president. She flew out of Dennison Airport in Quincy, and she helped finance the airport's operation by investing a small amount of money. And in 1927, she flew the first official flight out of Dennison Airport. Earhart worked as a sales representative for the Kinner Aircraft Company in the Boston area and wrote local newspaper columns promoting flying. As her celebrity grew, she made plans to launch an organization for female flyers. Now to her first woman to cross the Atlantic endeavor. And it's a twisted story, so bear with me. By the way, Viewbot says also named after Jack Amelia Nickersoff. I don't have any information about that, but if you say so, I'll believe it until somebody tells me you're wrong. In early 1928, inspired by Charles Lindbergh's successful solo transatlantic flight in 1927, American heiress Amy Phillips Guest, daughter of philanthropist Andrew Carnegie's business partner, Henry Phipps Jr. There he is, Henry Phipps Jr. Doesn't he look like a guy with a lot of dough from back then? Or someone on the cover of a cough drop box? One of the two. Well, this rich gal, Amy Phipps Guest, she announced her intention to become the first woman to cross the Atlantic by air. At the time, she was living in London with her husband, former British Air Minister Frederick Guest. Using her wealth and social connections, she assembled a team of aviation professionals to support her endeavor. She hired a pilot, Wilmer Stultz, from Williamsburg, Pennsylvania, to lead the flight. In March of 1928, Stultz had made headlines for completing the first nonstop flight from New York to Havana, accompanied by Olivier Laboutier and Mabel Bull aboard the aircraft Columbia. The previous year, Stultz had also piloted transatlantic attempts for aviator Francis Wilson Grayson. Trust me, we'll get to Amelia in a second here. This is all important. Guest, this rich philanthropist lady, also recruited mechanic and co-pilot Lewis Gordon from right here in Collin County, Texas. For the aircraft, she acquired a Fokker trimotor from famed explorer Commander Richard Byrd. Yes, the legendary Richard Byrd. Byrd had initially planned to use the plane for an Antarctic expedition, but when his backer, Edsel Ford, yes, son of Henry Ford, yes, who they named the Edsel after, suggested using a Ford trimotor instead, and Byrd agreed and sold the German aircraft. Byrd would later serve as technical advisor for the transatlantic flight. Guest named the plane Friendship to honor the special relationship between the United States and her new home, Great Britain. However, upon learning of her plans, Guest's family reacted with alarm. Her sons even threatened to quit Yale and Cambridge, respectively. Under family pressure, Guest reluctantly gave up her dream of making the flight herself. Nevertheless, she remained determined to see a woman achieve this milestone, and instead of flying, she resolved to sponsor the project and began searching for what she called the right sort of girl. The candidate would need to be a pilot, well-educated, well-mannered, physically attractive, and American. Sound like anybody we know? Well, so it was that in April of 1928, George Palmer Putnam, the publicist and publisher of Charles Lindbergh's best-selling autobiography, caught wind of the planned transatlantic attempt. Curious, he met with his friend, Captain Hilton Rayleigh, and shared what he had heard. Richard Byrd had sold his plane to a mysterious buyer, and that floats were being fitted to fly the plane at East Boston Airport. Determined to get involved, Putnam encouraged Rayleigh to crash the gate and investigate. Rayleigh found Wilmer Stultz in a bar. Catching him in a talkative mood, as sometimes occurs in a bar. Learned of Amy Guest and the true purpose of the newly outfitted seaplane Friendship. Putnam and Rayleigh resolved to take on the task of finding the right sort of girl on Amy Guest's behalf. Rayleigh reached out to his friend, Rear Admiral Reginald R. Belknap in Boston. After hearing the criteria outlined by Guest, Belknap immediately replied, "Call Dennison House and ask for Amelia Earhart." Upon receiving the call, Earhart was initially skeptical. Yes, she was skeptical, but agreed to meet him at his office. The moment she arrived, Rayleigh was convinced he had found the right women. There was just one. Almost immediately, he asked her, "How would you like to be the first woman to cross the Atlantic?" Earhart later wrote, "Under the circumstances, I couldn't say no." However, Amelia Earhart was a tough cookie. Sorry, I'm using 1920s lingo to help illustrate the moment. Amelia Earhart had conditions before accepting the invitation. She made it clear that the role of a mere passenger held no appeal to her. She wanted the opportunity to take her turn at the controls. Although she lacked experience with multi-engine aircraft and non-visual instrument flying, it was agreed that, weather permitting, she would be allowed to pilot the aircraft for a portion of the journey. It was written into her flight contract that Earhart would hold the title of commander aboard Friendship. She was granted final authority over all matters of policy, procedure, personnel, and any other issues that might arise during the mission. at least until their arrival in London. Both Wilmer Stultz and Lewis Gordon would serve as her subordinates during the flight. By the way, do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell. It's all free. Just a click to like, man. It only costs you a click. A little something for the effort. Just saying. We also have super chats and memberships if anybody's feeling like a millionaire right now. On June 3rd, 1928, after 3 unsuccessful attempts to take off from the Jeffries Yacht Club in East Boston, the crew of the Friendship made critical adjustments to reduce weight. 6 5-gallon cans of fuel were unloaded, and backup pilot Lou Gower voluntarily stepped down from the crew to further lighten the aircraft. The 4th attempt proved successful. After 67 tense seconds, Friendship lifted off the water and climbed steadily, heading north on the first leg of its transatlantic journey to Trepassey, Newfoundland. Friendship finally arrived at Trepassey on June 5th after poor weather forced Wilmer Stultz to make an unexpected landing in Halifax, Nova Scotia the day before. Earhart later described the arrival at Trepassey as chaotic, likening it to a rodeo with maritime cowboys in small boats aggressively vying to tow the plane, nearly entangling it in ropes and knocking crew member Slim Gordon into the water. Aren't these names great? Wilmer Stultz, Slim Gordon. And then all the hoity-toity names they had. Stranded by relentless gales, dense fog, and mechanical setbacks, the crew of the Friendship endured nearly a fortnight of frustrating delays. Their departure was repeatedly thwarted by unpredictable tides, stormy seas, and sputtering engines, turning what should have been a quick refuel stop into a test of endurance. When dawn broke, clear and brisk over Newfoundland on June 17th, and weather reports suggested marginally favorable conditions over the Atlantic, Earhart insisted they seize the opportunity to take off, despite, mind you, objections from pilot Wilmer Stultz, who, as you might expect, was nursing a severe hangover. After nearly 2 weeks of delays, Friendship finally took to the skies. Now, there was a rival aircraft, the Columbia. It remained grounded during this time period. That socialite, Mabel Bowl, that had made that previous record-setting flight just as a passenger, yes, she and Captain Oliver Laboutier, they didn't take off. Laboutier refused to risk flying in the still uncertain weather and chose to wait for clearer skies. Frustrated and left behind, Bowl could only listen for updates as Friendship soared eastward toward the United Kingdom. Furious and disheartened, she accused Earhart's team of receiving preferential treatment, claiming they had been provided with more favorable weather reports than the one given to Columbia. That accusation was firmly rejected by the local meteorologist, who maintained that both crews had received identical forecasts. Nevertheless, Friendship had gained the advantage, not by deception, but by sheer daring. From early in the flight, the Friendship crew encountered fog, cloud cover, poor visibility, forcing pilot Wilmer Stultz to sober up and rely entirely on instrument flying. Earhart, although a licensed pilot, had no experience with non-visual, instrument-only flying and was therefore unable to take the controls. Instead, she kept the flight log and helped with navigation checks, while mechanic Lewis Gordon managed fuel and engine performance. Several hours into the flight, they spotted the SS America, an ocean liner under the command of Captain George Freed, roughly 75 miles southeast of Cobb, Ireland. Hoping to confirm their position, the crew of the Friendship circled the vessel. Captain Freed, recognizing the significance of the aircraft, ordered the ship's name and location to be chalked on the deck to assist the crew. However, before the message could be prepared, Friendship had already vanished into the mist, continuing eastward. Critically, the aircraft's radio had failed early in the flight, leaving the crew unable to transmit or receive any messages. This failure meant they could not confirm their course, update anyone on their status, or receive weather updates. As a result, their arrival location would be a complete surprise to those on the ground. After nearly 21 hours in the air, with low fuel and limited visibility due to persistent mist, the crew of the Friendship were in urgent need of a suitable landing site. While flying along the coast of South Wales, although they didn't know it was South Wales, they didn't know their location at the time, they identified an estuary and a nearby industrial town with a harbor as a potential landing area. The aircraft landed in the Bury estuary, between the town of Bury Port and the village of Pwyll in Carmarthenshire, Wales. Upon landing, co-pilot Lewis Slim Gordon climbed onto the starboard pontoon and secured the aircraft to a large navigation buoy off the coast. Using rope kept on board for emergencies or for use as a sea anchor, this improvised mooring was the only option available in the area. Despite their arrival, following a transatlantic flight, initial local response was minimal. A few nearby railway workers observed the aircraft but didn't approach it. Eventually, Norman Fisher, a manager at the Frickers Metal Company in Buryport, rowed out to the plane. Rowed, like with two oars. Wilmer Stultz went ashore with him to make contact with their sponsors who were waiting in Southampton. The original intention had been to refuel in the estuary and continued the journey to Southampton, where the crew's sponsors, including Captain Hilton Rainey and Amy Phipps Guest, were assembled. Earhart and Gordon remained on board the aircraft as the crew did not consider the flight officially complete at that point. Several small boats approached the aircraft during this time, but Earhart declined to go ashore, intending to do so only if the flight continued as planned. Later that day, Captain Rayleigh, arrived in Buryport by seaplane, accompanied by Alan Raymond, a reporter for the New York Times. Following discussions regarding the fuel, gosh, that was weird. Fuel status. That was really strange. That was super strange. Sorry about that. My computer locked up for a second. Anyway, decision was made to take Friendship to the Buryport harbor. It would be there in the small Welsh harbor town that Earhart's transatlantic journey officially concluded, securing her place in history as the first woman to cross the Atlantic by air. Dun, dun, dun. As the world's press descended on Buryport, Earhart attracted the majority of public and media attention, although she consistently emphasized that the primary credit belonged to the pilots. When interviewed after coming ashore, she remarked, "Wilmer Stultz did all the flying. Had to. I was just baggage, like a sack of potatoes. Maybe someday I'll try it alone." Foreshadowing. Later that evening, the crew traveled by car to the Ashburnham Hotel in nearby Pembrey, where they were able to rest and recover after their historic journey. Friendship departed Buryport Harbor at approximately 11 a.m. on the 19th of June, 1928, beginning the final leg of its journey to Southampton, but not without a final moment of drama. Among the spectators that morning was Sir Arthur Whitten Brown, who, alongside John Alcock, had completed the first nonstop transatlantic flight in 1919. They traveled there to congratulate Earhart and present her with a bouquet of flowers. A boat was dispatched to carry him out to the Friendship, but they didn't know he was going to be arriving, so they left. And as a result, a potentially historic meeting between the first man and first woman to cross the Atlantic nonstop by air was narrowly missed. At Southampton, the Friendship crew were once again met by enthusiastic crowds. Among those welcoming them was Amy Phipps Guest, the flight's principal sponsor and owner of the Friendship. It was the first time Guest and Earhart had met in person. Upon returning to the United States, Earhart and the crew of the Friendship were met with widespread acclaim. On July 6, 1928, they were honored with a ticker tape parade along the Canyon of Heroes in New York City, a traditional celebration reserved for national heroes. This photo I'm showing is not 1928, but it is a ticker tape parade, and it is the Canyon of Heroes. So just work with me, will you? Thousands lined Broadway to celebrate the first successful transatlantic flight by a woman. Shortly after, the crew was received by none other than Calvin Coolidge. He was the president. Earhart became the focus of particular media and public attention. Despite her limited role as passenger during the flight, her status as the first woman who crossed the Atlantic by air captured the American public's imagination. Earhart, Stultz, and Gordon were all given receptions at Boston and Chicago, where they were welcomed by civic leaders and a large crowd. Earhart received numerous awards and honors during this period. Her modesty and charisma further endeared her to the American public, and her fame quickly surpassed that of her fellow crew. Oh, I see that the dumb ice cream guy is beginning his nonsense. In February. Who's going to buy ice cream in February? I know, nobody. He always shows up during the show. I swear to you. I swear to you. I will no doubt, if he ever shows up and I'm not on the air, have words with him. Guido Samurai is here. Always good to see him. The flight marked the beginning of Earhart's rise to international prominence. With the help of publisher and publicist George Putnam, she began a successful lecture tour and endorsed various products. She also wrote a book, 20 hours and 40 minutes, Our Flight in the Friendship. And the book was a smash hit. The actual flight time was 20 hours and 49 minutes, though. I don't know why that is, but it is. It just is. When Earhart became famous, the press dubbed her Lady Lindy because of her resemblance to fellow aviator Charles Lindbergh, and they also called her Queen of the Air. Immediately upon her return to the United States, she undertook an exhausting lecture tour in 1928 and 1929. George Putnam, he had undertaken to heavily promote Earhart in a campaign that included publishing that book, lectures, and pictures of her in the media, endorsing products, including luggage. Yes. Wanting to support Richard Byrd's expedition to the South Pole, she accepted an endorsement deal for Lucky Strike cigarettes. And the money was to go, all of it, to Richard Byrd's attempt to go to the South Pole. Well, after the Lucky Strike ads, McCall's, a women's magazine, retracted their offer for Earhart to become their aviation editor, which was really, really stupid. But at the time, women smoking cigarettes was seen as undesirable. Dear me. Dear me. The marketing campaign by both Earhart and Putnam was successful in establishing the Earhart mystique. Rather than simply endorsing the products, Earhart became involved in the promotion, especially in women's fashions. The active living lines that were sold in stores such as Macy's. By the way, there was only one Macy's at the time, not like now. Well, they were an expression of Earhart's new image. Her concept of simple, natural lines matched with wrinkle-proof, washable materials was the embodiment of a sleek, purposeful, but feminine Amelia Earhart. And she was known as AE. Everybody would refer to her as AE. And these celebrity endorsements helped Earhart, finance her flying. Because she was all about the flying. Paz It Up Patriot is here. Good to see you, Paz. Good to see you. Guido Samurai says, wonder if she actually smoked. Her planes must have taken stamina to fly. I don't know if she did or not. She wasn't against doing an ad for it. Earhart accepted a position as associate editor at Cosmopolitan magazine and used it to campaign for greater public acceptance of aviation, especially focusing on the role of women entering the field. Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In 1929, Transcontinental Air Transport appointed Earhart and Margaret Bartlett Miller, also a pioneering aviator, to promote air travel, particularly for women. And Earhart set up the Ludington Airline, the first regional shuttle service between New York and Washington. She was appointed the vice president of National Airways, which operated Boston Maine Airways and several other airlines in the Northeast. And by 1940, that group had become Northeast Airlines. Yes. The Ludington Airlines. Yes, look at the Ludington guy with his winged trophies. Yes, yes. Yes, she was quite, yes. What she did there was, yes. She was also a competitive flyer, okay? In August of 1928, Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly solo across the North American continent and back. Her piloting skills and professionalism gradually grew, and she was acknowledged by experienced professional pilots who flew with her. General Lee Wade, who flew with Earhart in 1929, said she was a born flyer with a delicate touch on the stick. Which, believe me, back in 1929 meant something entirely different than it does now. Get your minds out of the gutter. Come on. Come on. Amelia Earhart deserves a lot better than that. Earhart made her first attempt at competitive air racing in 1929 during the first Santa Monica to Cleveland Women's Air Derby, which left Santa Monica August 18th and arrived in Cleveland August 26th. During the race, Earhart settled into fourth place in the heavy planes division. At the second-to-last stop in Columbus, Earhart's friend Ruth Nichols, who was in third place, well, she had an accident. Her aircraft hit a tractor and flipped over, forcing her out of the race, so she placed third. In 1930, she became an official of the National Aeronautic Association, and in this role, she promoted the establishment of separate women's records and was instrumental in persuading the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale to accept a similar international standard. On April 8th, 1931, Earhart set a world altitude record of 18,415 feet, flying a Pitcairn PCA-2 autogyro she borrowed from the Beechnut Chewing Gum Company. This is an actual photo of that. And for those of you watching, listening to our audio podcast, this particular aircraft, imagine an old school airplane with fixed landing wheels, and instead of it did have a propeller on the front. Okay, there was a small propeller on the front, but it also had like a helicopter propeller over the top of it. That's what an autogyro was, and she was quite adept at flying this particular aircraft. During this period, Earhart became with the 99s, an organization of female pilots providing moral support and advancing the cause of women in aviation. In 1929, following the Women's Air Derby, she called a meeting of female pilots. She suggested the name be based on the number of charter members and became the organization's first president in 1930. Earhart was a vigorous advocate for female pilots. When the 1934 Bendix Trophy race banned women from competing, Earhart refused to fly screen actor Mary Pickford to Cleveland to open up the race. She didn't like that business. I ain't flying you. If I don't get to be in the race, I ain't flying you. Remember that George Putnam guy? Well, Amelia Earhart married her public relations manager, George Putnam, on February 7th, 1931, in Putnam's mother's house in Connecticut, in what has been described as a marriage of convenience. Earhart gained a tireless promoter, and Putnam, who was heir to a publishing company, gained an opportunity for cultural dominance. Earhart had been engaged to Samuel Chapman, a chemical engineer from Boston, but she broke the engagement off in late November of 1928. Earhart reportedly spent the summer of 1928 writing her first book at the home of Putnam and his first wife while having an affair with Putnam. Putnam, who was known as GP, was divorced in 1929 and sought out Earhart, proposing to her 6 times before she agreed to marry him. Earhart referred to her marriage as a partnership and dual control in a letter to Putnam and hand-delivered to him on the day of the wedding. She wrote, "I want you to understand I shall not hold you to any medieval code of faithfulness to me, nor shall I consider myself bound to you similarly. I may have to keep some place where I can go to be by myself now and then, for I cannot guarantee to endure all the times the confinement of even an attractive cage." By the way, this photo I'm showing right now, for those of you in audio podcasts, may be the most chauvinistic photo I've ever seen for a man and wife. It's George Putnam, hand in one pocket of his suit coat, the other on his wife's shoulder. She is sitting at his feet, and he's looking down on her. Like, it's almost like it's his prize Irish setter. I'm just going to say that. Earhart's ideas on marriage were liberal for the time. She believed in equal responsibilities for both breadwinners and kept her own name rather than referred to as Mrs. Putnam. When the New York Times referred to her as Mrs. Putnam, she laughed it off. Putnam also learned he would be called Mr. Earhart. There was no honeymoon for the couple because Earhart was involved in a 9-day cross-country tour promoting autogyros, and the tour's sponsor, Beechnut Chewing Gum. For long-lasting flavor, Beechnut. Earhart and Putnam never had children, but Putnam had 2 sons, the explorer and writer David Putnam and George Palmer Putnam Jr. from his previous marriage to Dorothy Binney, heir to her father's chemical company, Binney and Smith. All these people are rich. They're rich. And I understand, and I don't know that I have a picture anywhere here, but I understand that Amelia Earhart and Dorothy Binney became friendly after the divorce. They weren't antagonistic to each other at all. And here's Amelia with Herbert Hoover, the president. On May 20th, 1932, 34-year-old Amelia Earhart set off from Harbor Grace, Newfoundland, with a copy of the Telegraph Journal given to her by journalist Stuart Truman to confirm the date of the flight. She intended to fly to Paris in her single-engine Lockheed Vega 5B to emulate Charles Lindbergh's solo flight 5 years earlier. Her technical advisor for the flight was the Norwegian-American aviator Bernt Balchen. I can't make these names up, folks. Who helped her prepare for her flight and played the role of decoy for the press because he was ostensibly preparing Earhart's Vega for his own Arctic flight. After a flight lasting 14 hours and 56 minutes, during which she contended with strong northerly winds, icy conditions, mechanical problems, Earhart landed in a pasture at Culmore, north of Derry, Northern Ireland. The landing was witnessed by Cecil King and T. Sawyer. When a farmhand asked, have you flown far? Earhart replied, from America. Well, it was when she made this solo nonstop flight, she received the Distinguished Flying Cross from Congress, the Cross Knight of the Legion of Honor from the French government, and the Gold Medal of the National Geographic Society from President Herbert Hoover. As her fame grew, Earhart developed friendships with many people in high office, most notably First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. This was the most photogenic picture of Eleanor Roosevelt I could find, who shared many of Earhart's interests, especially women's causes. After flying with Earhart, Roosevelt obtained a student permit but did not further pursue her plans to learn to fly. Earhart and Roosevelt frequently communicated with each other. Another flyer, Jacqueline Cochran, who was said to be Earhart's rival, also became her confidant during this period. A lot of crazy, pioneering female pilots of the time. I'm telling you, there were. On January 11th, 1935, Earhart became the first aviator to fly solo from Honolulu, Hawaii to Oakland, California. This time, Earhart used a Lockheed 5C Vega, although many aviators had attempted this flight, including participants in the 1927 Dole Air Race, which flew in the opposite direction, resulting in 3 casualties. Earhart's flight was mainly routine with no mechanical breakdowns. In her final hours, she relaxed and listened to the broadcast of the Metropolitan Opera from New York. Well, rather. On April 19, 1935, using her Lockheed Vega aircraft that she had named Old Bessie the Fire Horse, because you got to nickname your plane, don't you? Don't you? Really? Hit the like. Please like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell. Earhart flew solo from Los Angeles to Mexico City. Her next record attempt was a nonstop flight from Mexico City to New York. After she set off on May 8th, her flight was uneventful, although large crowds that greeted her in Newark, New Jersey were concerned because she had to be careful not to taxi into them. Yes, taxiing into them. Earhart again participated in the 1935 Bendix Trophy long-distance air race, finishing 5th. The best she could manage because her stock Lockheed Vega, whose maximum speed was 195 miles an hour, was outclassed by purpose-built aircraft that reached more than 300 miles an hour. The race had been difficult because a competitor had died in a fire at takeoff, and Jacqueline Cochran, yes, Jackie Cochran, she was forced to pull out due to mechanical problems. There was also blinding fog and violent thunderstorms plaguing the race. And nobody wants that. Between 1930 and 1935, Amelia Earhart set 7 women's speed and distance aviation records in a variety of aircraft, including the Kinner Airster, Lockheed Vega, and Pitcairn Autogyro. By 1935, recognizing the limitations of her lovely Red Vega in long transoceanic flights, Earhart contemplated the new prize, one flight which I most wanted to attempt, a circumnavigation of the globe, as near its waistline as could be. For the new venture, she would need a new aircraft. Yes, she would. At Earhart's urging, in June 1935, her husband purchased a small house in Toluca Lake, a San Fernando Valley celebrity enclave community between the Warner Brothers and Universal Pictures studio complexes. In 1935, Earhart and Paul Mantz established a business partnership they had been considering since late 1934, establishing the short-lived Earhart-Mantz Flying School, which Mantz controlled and operated through his aviation company, United Air Services. Putnam handled publicity for the school, which primarily taught instrument flying using these things called link trainers, which I'm showing. And for our audio podcast people, it looks like a ride outside of a grocery store that you put a quarter in. Maybe they were great. I don't know. I think that the link trainers got better and better and better as time went along, but they were used to train pilots. Also in 1935, Earhart joined Purdue University as a visiting faculty member to counsel women on careers and as a technical advisor to its Department of Aeronautics. In early 1936, Earhart started planning to fly around the world. If she succeeded, she would become the first woman to do so. Although others had flown around the world, Earhart's flight would be the longest at 29,000 miles because it followed a rough equatorial route around the center. Earhart planned to court publicity along the route to increase interest in a planned book about the expedition. And people donated. Purdue University established the Amelia Earhart Fund for Aeronautical Research and gave $50,000, equivalent to over $1 million in today's money, to fund the purchase of a Lockheed Electra 10E. In July of 1936, Lockheed Aircraft Company built the airplane, which was fitted with extra fuel tanks and other extensive modifications. Earhart dubbed the twin-engine monoplane her flying laboratory. Plane was built at Lockheed's plant in Burbank, California. Earhart chose Harry Manning as her navigator. He had been the captain of the President Roosevelt, the ship that had transported Earhart from Europe in 1928. Manning was also a pilot and a skilled radio operator who knew Morse code. The original plan was a two-person crew. Earhart would fly and Manning would navigate. During a flight across the U.S. that included Earhart, Manning, and Putnam, Earhart flew using landmarks that she and Putnam knew, and so they knew where they were. Manning did a navigation fix that alarmed Putnam because Manning made a minor navigational error that put them in the wrong state. They were flying close to the state line, but Putnam was still concerned. Sometimes later, Putnam and Mantz arranged a flight to test Manning's navigational skill, and under poor navigational conditions, Manning's position was off by 20 miles. That's not good. Through contacts in the aviation community, Fred Noonan was chosen as a second navigator because there were a lot of extra factors to be dealt with while using celestial navigation for aircraft, in other words, the stars. Noonan, a licensed ship's captain, was experienced in both marine and flight navigation. He had recently left Pan Am, where he established most of the company's China Clipper seaplane routes across the Pacific. Noonan had also been responsible for training Pan Am's navigators to fly the route between San Francisco and Manila. Under the original plans, Noonan would navigate from Hawaii to Howland Island. Howland Island. a difficult portion of the flight. Then Manning would continue with Earhart to Australia, and she would proceed on her own for the remainder of the project. Now, there was an original attempt that was abandoned after a crash that damaged the aircraft. Didn't hurt anybody, but the aircraft was damaged. The propeller hubs, variable pitch mechanisms were having problems, so the aircraft was taken to the U.S. Navy's Luke Field facility at Pearl Harbor for servicing. And they resumed the flight 3 days later with Earhart, Noonan, and Manning on board. The next destination was Howland Island, a small island in the Pacific. Manning, the radio operator, had made arrangements to use radio direction finding to home into the island, but the flight never left Luke Field. During the takeoff run, there was an uncontrolled ground loop. The forward landing gear collapsed. Both propellers hit the ground. The plane skidded on his belly. The cause isn't known, but some witnesses, including an Associated Press journalist, said they saw a tire blow. And Amelia Earhart thought the same thing. While it was being repaired, Earhart and Putnam secured additional funds for another attempt, and the second attempt began with an unpublicized flight from Oakland to Miami, Florida. And then, when she landed in Miami, she announced her intentions. Manning had left the crew by this point, okay? Left it. So now it's just Noonan and Earhart. Well, the pair departed Miami on June 1st, and after numerous stops in South America, Africa, the Indian subcontinent, and Southeast Asia, they arrived at Lae, New Guinea, on June 29, 1937. Now, at this stage, about 22,000 miles of the journey had been completed. The remaining 7,000 miles would be over the Pacific. Yeah. So they take off in the heavily loaded Electra. Their destination, again, was Howland Island. Flat sliver of land, 6,500 feet long, 1,600 feet wide. The expected flying time was about 20 hours, accounting for the 2-hour time zone difference. It was expected to land on the morning of 2nd of July. In preparation for this trip, the U.S. Coast Guard had sent the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca to the island to offer communication and navigation support for the flight. The cutter was to communicate with Earhart's aircraft via radio and transmit a homing signal to help the aviators locate the island. All of these navigation methods failed to guide Earhart to Howland Island. Around 3 p.m., Earhart reported her altitude as 10,000 feet, but they were reducing that due to thick clouds. Around 5 p.m., Earhart reported her altitude as 7,000 feet and her speed at about 170 miles an hour. During Earhart's and Noonan's approach to Howland Island, that cutter, the Itasca, received strong, clear voice transmissions from Earhart, identifying as KHAQQ, but she was unable to hear voice transmissions from the ship. The first calls received from Earhart were routine reports stating the weather was cloudy and overcast at 2:45 a.m., just before 5 a.m. on July the 2nd. These calls were broken up by static, but at this point, the aircraft was a long distance from Howland. At 6:14 a.m., another call was received stating that the aircraft was within 200 miles and requesting that the ship use its direction finder to provide a bearing for the aircraft. Earhart began whistling into the microphone to provide a continuous signal for the ship's crew to use. At this point, the radio operators on Itasca realized their system could not tune in to the aircraft's signal at a certain hertz. Radio man Leo Bellerts later commented, "He was sitting there sweating blood because I couldn't do a darn thing about it." A similar call asking for a bearing was received at 6:45 a.m. when Earhart estimated they were 100 miles away. An Itasca radio log at 7:30 a.m. states the aircraft had only a half hour of fuel remaining. A further radio log states they thought they were near Itasca but could not locate it and were flying at 1,000 feet. In her transmission at 7:58 a.m., Earhart said she could not hear Itasca and asked them to send voice signals so she could try to take a radio bearing. Itasca reported this signal as the loudest possible signal, indicating Earhart and Noonan were in the immediate area. The ship could not send voice at the frequency she asked for, so they sent Morse code signals instead. Earhart acknowledged receiving these, but said she was unable to determine their location. The last voice transmission received on Howland Island from Earhart said she and Noonan were flying along a line of a position running north to south on 157 to 337 degrees, which Noonan would have calculated and drawn on a chart as passing through Howland. After all contact with Howland Island was lost, attempts to reach the flyers with voice and Morse code were made. Operators across the Pacific and in the United States may have heard signals from the Electra, but these were weak or unintelligible. A series of misunderstandings, errors, or mechanical failures are likely to have occurred on the final approach to Howland Island. Noonan had earlier written about problems affecting the accuracy of RDF in navigation. Another cited cause of possible confusion was that Itasca and Earhart planned their communication schedule using time systems set a half an hour apart. Earhart was using Greenwich Civil Time and Itasca was using a naval time zone designated system. Sources have noted Earhart's apparent lack of familiarity with her direction finding system, which had been fitted to the aircraft just prior to the flight. The system was equipped with a new receiver from Bendix Corporation. Earhart's only training on the system was a brief introduction at Lockheed's factory. The Electra expected Itasca to transmit signals Electra could use as an RDF location beacon to find the ship. In theory, the plane could listen for the signal while rotating its loop antenna. None of that happened. The U.S. government investigated the aircraft's disappearance, and in its report concluded Earhart's plane ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. During the 1970s, retired United States Navy Captain Lawrence Safford began a lengthy analysis of the flight. He concluded the flight had suffered from poor planning and worse execution. An even worser execution. Say, would you like to hear a newsreel of her disappearance from the day? I'll bet you would. Here it comes.
Only a short time ago, Amelia Earhart checked over every detail of her $80,000 flying laboratory in preparation for her round-the-world flight. This was to have been her greatest achievement, a sky dash of 28,000 miles. With her husband, George Palmer Putnam on right, she discussed the hazardous course which had been plotted for her by Fred Noonan, the navigator who embarked with Miss Earhart upon this great flight, a flight which was to have marked her retirement to aeronautical research. Then to a waiting world came news of disaster as the plane failed to reach tiny Howland Island in mid-Pacific. A British freighter, the Coast Guard, and the Navy sped to the search, the battleship Colorado steaming out from Honolulu under forced draft. From California, the aircraft carrier Lexington, with 3,000 men and 72 planes aboard, races into the distant Pacific to join the greatest searching party in the history of aviation.
There you go. As you can tell, they pulled out all the stops. The Colorado got after it. Everybody under the sun has tried to find this thing. Many researchers believed Earhart and Noonan died during or shortly after the crash. Rear admirals from the United States Navy have commented on it. They think they know where she landed. They don't really know. That nobody knows. Nobody knows. They don't know. They think they know, but they don't know. They just don't. Let's see here. Robert Ballard, the guy that was searched for the Titanic and found it, he wanted to find it. He couldn't find it. They spent what's equivalent to $90 million in today's money in air and sea rescue by the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard. Most costly and intensive in U.S. history up to that time. But no physical evidence of Earhart, Noonan, or their plane were ever found. There's been reports that amateur radio people heard emergency transmissions. That's never been confirmed. A lot of them may have been the USS Colorado, and they're trying to find her rather than her own emergency transmissions. In late July of 1937, George Putnam asked to have her declared dead in absentia. The 7-year waiting period was waived so he could manage her finances. As a result, she was declared legally dead January 5th, 1939. In 2003 and 2006, David Jordan extensively searched a 1,200 square mile area north and west of Howland Island with deep-sea sonar devices. Those cost $4.5 million, but didn't find any wreckage. There have been people that have said Nikomororo Island has some wreckage around it. It's never been substantially proved. I know recently they say they have found her. There's also a bizarre theory. I mean, a bizarre theory. And this aired on the National Geographic Channel. And it's supposed that she survived the flight and changed her name and became Irene Craigmille Bolam. That was also published in a book called Amelia Earhart Lives. Shortly after the book's publication, Bolam filed a lawsuit requesting $1.5 million in damage, which is about $12 million today, and the book's publisher withdrew it from the market. And it was settled out of court because she's not Irene Bolam. Incidentally, all of the government records concerning Amelia Earhart have been declassified and released. There is a folded wing shrine with her name on it in the world. A crew of a plane called, it's called the Pellegrino's crew. It's in 1967, Anne Pellegrino flew a similar aircraft to Earhart's Lockheed 10A Electra to complete a round-the-world flight that followed her original flight plan. And on the 30th anniversary of her disappearance, she dropped a wreath over Howland Island in honor of Amelia Earhart. In 1997, on the 60th anniversary of her around-the-world flight, San Antonio businesswoman Linda Finch retraced the final flight path, flying a restored 1935 Lockheed Electra 10, the same make and model as Earhart's. There have been other commemorative flights. Many things have been named after Amelia Earhart. In 1942, a United States Liberty ship named SS Amelia Earhart was launched. It was wrecked in 1949. And then there was this. The United States Navy ship Amelia Earhart was named in her honor in 2007, and it still floats today. Purdue University opened Earhart Hall in honor of her legacy and contribution to the university. It's a residence hall, I think. They also erected a bronze statue of Earhart holding a propeller in front of the residence hall. And the university opened a new Purdue University airport terminal called Amelia Earhart Terminal. Yes. The Earhart Light, also known as the Amelia Earhart Light, is a navigational day beacon on Howland Island where she was supposed to land, although it is no longer operational. Amelia Earhart Airport in Atchison, Kansas is named in her honor. A small section of Earhart's Lockheed Electra starboard engine nacelle that was recovered following the March 1937 Hawaii crash, not the missing crash, but the crash where they had to start all over again, has been confirmed as authentic, and isn't that great? The Amelia Earhart commemorative stamp, 8 cents airmail postage, was issued in 1963 by the U.S. Postmaster General. I'm not going to get into all of the things. She was inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame 1992. There is a full bronze statue of Amelia Earhart at the Spirit of Flight Center in Lafayette, Colorado. In popular culture, novels, plays, books, there's been a lot of them. 1942, a movie starring Rosalind Russell, Flight for Freedom, in a highly fictionalized account of her life. Amelia Earhart, The Price of Courage, is an American Experience television documentary. Amelia Earhart, The Final Flight, starring Diane Keaton, Rutger Hauer, and Bruce Dern, was initially released as a television movie and then subsequently re-released as a theatrical feature. The biopic, Amelia, features Hilary Swank playing Amelia Earhart. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I got to tell you about the aviation legend that was and that is Amelia Earhart. Our chat room looks dormant. Our super chats and memberships lay barren. I can tell you that tomorrow we will cover the kidnapping of Patty Hearst. That's a good one. Patty Hearst, rich heiress, becomes subversive bank robber. You'll want to tune in for that. Also, the guy that went to my high school is a part of it. His parents were on my paper route, and it terrorized me as a young teenager. Thursday, we will talk about the disappearance of Tiffany Daniels, still unsolved. Saturday, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus and its history. And then Sunday, we will discuss the Twilight Zone. Hey, I'm looking at that old clock on the wall, and it's telling me that about time for me to amscray. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. No, sir. You can't. It's not permitted. I'd like to thank everybody who showed up. We got Paused Up Patriot. We got Guido Samurai. We got Viewbot. We got Terry Nee. Oh, my God, I missed Terry Nee. We got Sky. Of course, we've got the gang over at the Geraldine's location in Indianapolis, Chef Neil and Cooper. And so, I think we can all agree, Amelia Earhart, she was the kind of person that just wanted to fly and nothing was going to stop her, and set record after record after record. And I hope they do find her someday and all that wreckage and what actually happened. That being said, I think the only thing left to say is, till next time. Wait a minute. We got to chat. No, thank you, Tom. No, thank you. Till next time, we'll see you next time.
lights are low. So start the show. Time's here to go. So let's